A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back, able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is," but others said, "No, he just looks like him." He said, "I am." So they said to him, "How were your eyes opened?" He replied, "The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went there and washed and was able to see." And they said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought the one who was blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." Now the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and gained his sight until they summoned the parents of the one who had gained his sight. They asked him, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How does he now see?" His parents answered and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. We do not know how he sees now, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age. He can speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone acknowledged him as the Christ, he would be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents said, "He is of age, question him." So a second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner." He replied, "If he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see." So they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They ridiculed him and said, "You are that man's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from." The man answered and said to them, "This is what is so amazing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshiped him. Then Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not also blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." The Gospel of the Lord.
A few weeks ago, you might remember that I brought my glasses out to show you how bad my vision was. Now, I rarely wear my glasses in public because with them I have absolutely no peripheral vision. I can't see anything out here. So instead, as I do all the time, I'm wearing my contact lenses, which are very, very strong. I want to show you right now my driver's license. Now, I still have to update mine, so don't ridicule me for that. On the back of your driver's license, if you happen to have certain limitations, they're listed on here, and they're called restrictions. So one of my restrictions, maybe some of you have this too, it says, Restriction B, corrective lenses. What that means is that if I go out driving without my glasses or contact lenses, then I could probably get cited if I get pulled over for not wearing them. What's even worse is that if I happen to go out driving without glasses or contacts, you better pray that you're not on the road too. You may see me coming at you, but I will not see you coming at me. Now, a restriction means that you are limited, you're bound, you're confined, and you're prevented from passing a certain limit. Certainly, in today's gospel story, there is a major limitation. There is a major restriction. It's the man born blind. Not like the blindness that I have, which is simply I can't see things very well. Everything is blurry when I don't wear glasses or contacts. This is total blindness. There are lots of stories in the Bible about blindness. But blindness in the Bible always means something more. It's not just physical blindness. It always shows that there's a deeper blindness present, and God has to enter in and heal that blindness. That deeper blindness is always a spiritual blindness. It's a restriction. It's a restriction of spiritual sight. Blindness in the Bible is always an impaired ability to recognize the truth. And so today, Jesus is trying to show us that it's not just the man born blind who is the blind one, it's more than that. There are lots of people in today's gospel who are blind. Nice people and nasty people alike can be blind, is what Jesus is trying to show to us. So what does it mean to be spiritually blind? I'd like to just point out two things of what that might mean. First is to be blind to the depth of your sin, and second is to be blind to your blindness itself. So first of all, the blindness to the depths of your sin. Without like a spiritual sight, without being able to see as God sees, if you're spiritually blind, you define sin as only breaking the rules. What happens if you were to ask any layman, any Catholic out there, maybe a lot of you think this way, how would you define sin? Doing something wrong, right? It always implies an action. It's always something that I did that I wasn't supposed to do. And then you regret sin only if it causes problems in your life. But if it doesn't cause problems, it's okay. But what does spiritual sight do? It now changes how you define and understand sin. Now it's not just breaking the rules. Now you see sin as an attitude of heart that permeates everything that you do. Because ultimately, what sin is, what is the greatest sin? What's the sin that underlies all sins? Everyone shout it out. Anybody know? What's one of the 7 deadly sins? What makes me puffed up and think so highly about myself? What do we call that? Pride. The greatest sin, according to all of the fathers of the church, would be pride. Which means that I think so highly of myself, I can take care of myself, I can do everything myself, no one's going to help me, and I don't need to be fixed. People who have not converted, right, can admit to all kinds of sins. You and I can admit to all things. I lied, I cheated, I committed adultery, I stole something. All of those things are things that you do. Those are the easy ones that you can know, the sins that you do. What's less common to hear is, I'm a very self-centered person. I'm a prideful person. Only a spiritual sight that's granted by God can allow you to see how really self-centered you and I are. Spiritual sight allows you to say, look, I've done some bad things and I've done some good things. But even the good things I've done with some bad intentions. Even some of those good things that I've done to other people, I did it to get them to like me. Even the good things that I've done it so God can look with favor upon me, and God will bless me, and God will love me. See, it's that mistaken mindset that I do enough, and then God will respond or other people will respond. Rather than the spiritual mindset that says, God has done something for me, therefore I respond to it. And therefore I live a good life. Not, I am good, therefore God's good to me, but instead, God has been good to me, therefore I am good. If you have spiritual sight, the reason that you regret sin now changes. It's no longer, I regret my sin of cheating on my wife because she left me. That's a consequence. It's no longer, I regret sin because my lives have come back to haunt me. No, that reason has changed now. Now it's because it saddens God if you sin. If you regret sin because it screws up your life, then when it no longer screws up your life, then you go right back to that sin. But if you try not to sin because it saddens God and because it goes very much against what God has created you and me to be, then that's more likely to keep us from falling into that sin. The person who is spiritually blind says, I'm never going back to that sin. I'm never driving without my glasses on again. By the way, I've never driven with my glasses off or my contacts out, so just so you know. But the one who has a spiritual sight granted by God says, that is against what the Lord has created me to be, therefore I'm not going back to it. So when the Lord gives us spiritual sight, we're able to recognize the depth of sin, that it's an attitude of heart, and that attitude has to change. But also the second thing that changes is that we're no longer blind to our blindness itself. Right back to that sense of pride that you and I have. Who does Jesus encounter in today's gospel? There's the man born blind, but he also encounters a group of other people. Who are they called? It starts with a P. The Pharisees. Jesus is constantly butting heads with this group. Why? Because they're puffed up by, what's that other P word? Pride. If I do what God asks me to do, then God will love me, then other people will love me. If I follow God's law, and that's what gets me into God's favor. Therefore, I'm superior to everyone else if I follow God's law. But then you're blind to your blindness itself. Jesus says today, I came that the blind may see, and that those who see might become blind. The blind, the man born blind who recognizes his blindness, Jesus gives him a spiritual sight. But those who refuse to recognize their blindness, their self-sufficiency, their pride, Jesus is allowing them to become more blind. because they don't recognize that God is in charge, and it's God to whom they have to give the glory. He says to the Pharisees, "Since you claim you can see, your sin, your guilt remains." One of the marks of spiritual blindness is you don't know that you're blind. This past weekend, or actually Friday night into Saturday, I was with about 16 people from our parish. We joined another parish on their Alpha weekend. Alpha is a program that is meant to introduce you to those basic questions of life. Why am I here? Why did Jesus die for me? How does God want me to live the rest of my life? So there were about 130 or 140 people gathered around. Lots of praise and worship, lots of time for prayer. About 20% of the people there weren't even Catholic. But everyone wanted to enter into this relationship with Jesus. And lots of people had hearts converted. They admitted that there was blindness in their own heart and that needed to be transformed. Even I myself came to that realization this weekend. I was just one of a couple priests there. But I recognized that I needed a certain blindness. What was that blindness? It was pride. The sense that I can do all this by myself. The fact of running this parish all depends upon me and what I can do. And then the Lord tells me, it's not about you. It doesn't depend upon you. It depends upon me. And I was brought to a better spiritual sight and a release from that blindness. Today, after our homily, we'll be having a scrutiny of our catechumens and candidates, those who have been participating all year with us in RCIA, and will be welcomed into the church, receive their sacraments at the Easter Vigil. One of the reasons we read this gospel today is that their process that they've been going through epitomizes this man's journey, the blind man's journey, from blindness to sight, from darkness to light. And they're entering into that deep phase where the Lord has smothered their eyes with that clay made of spit, sent them to go wash in the pool, and they're able to come back able to see. That's the journey that you and I, who were baptized as infants, who never went through this process of intensification that they have, need to constantly re-enter, because we are blind too. And if we don't admit that, then it makes our blindness worse. The essence of spiritual blindness is the delusion of self-sufficiency. It's about forgetting that God is in charge. It's like driving without your contacts or your glasses, saying, I can do this all myself, I don't need help. But in contrast to that, spiritual sight relies upon the total grace of God. Jesus seeks us out, he opens our eyes, and he enables us to see, so that now you can endure whatever might arise in your life. Whatever those crosses are that you now have to bury. If it's actual blindness, if it's illness, if it's marriage problems, if your kids don't come to church, if you have rebellious teenagers, if you have addictions, if you have depression, if you have self-esteem issues. Spiritual sight allows you to see that God is in charge and you are not. So let's ask the Lord this week to take that restriction, that spiritual blindness restriction, and remove it from our hearts, to correct that vision so that we can see as God sees, and we can draw closer to the one who can give us true sight, who is Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.